All right, this lesson is Unit 3, Lesson 3. We are solving by square roots. This one's a little bit more direct than the quadratic formula method, but this only works for certain situations, so you have to be able to recognize when can you use the square root method. Our goal is to solve by isolating x squared and using the square root. So for this first problem, we notice that we have a single x squared. There is no x term or linear term. So it's kind of like if you have the standard form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If we don't have this part right here, if we're missing the term of just x, then you can solve by using the square root. But you can't always use this method. Whereas with the quadratic formula, that's our tried and true because it works in every situation that we have a quadratic. Okay? So the first thing we would do for this example 1 is subtract 23. We got to get that x squared by itself. So we get 2x squared equals negative 18 when we subtract those. X squared is still not by itself, so we got to divide by 2 on both sides. And now we get x squared equals negative 9. Now, we are solving for a variable, so we need to be careful because there's technically two solutions here. When we take the square root of x squared and of negative 9, we get a plus or minus situation. Remember, we are taking the square root of a negative number. Typically, the square root of 9 would be 3, but since it's a negative 9, we get 3i. So we get x equals plus or minus 3i. That's our two solutions there. All right, this next one, same process, but we are trying to get the parentheses isolated. So the first thing is subtract 8 from both sides. We get 2x minus 3 squared equals negative 8. Then we have to divide by 2 because we got to get rid of this 2 on the outside. And then we are left with x minus 3 squared equals negative 4. All right, now at this point, to undo the square, just like we normally would, is we got to take the square root of both sides. Okay, these are going to cancel each other out and we're left with x minus 3. But since, again, we took the square root and we are solving for x, we're going to end up with a plus or minus solution. And the square root of negative 4, typically 4 would just become 2, but it becomes 2i because it's a negative 4. Now what we would do is to get x by itself is we add 3, and we get two solutions. We get x equals 3 plus or minus 2i. If you want to write those out as two separate ideas, x equals 3 plus 2i, that's acceptable. And then you could write x equals 3 minus 2i. But this is also acceptable right here. So I'll put or. Example 3, here with this one, let's go ahead and I'm going to subtract 17 from both sides. We get negative 4x squared. Negative 19 minus 17 is negative 36. Then we divide by negative. Remember, when you divide by two negatives, it becomes a positive. So we actually get x squared equals positive 9 here. So there's no negatives to worry about. When we take the square root of both sides, though, we still have to be careful. Since we're solving a quadratic, we do get plus or minus 3. Two more to go here before the student problems. So with this one, the first step is going to be add 21 to both sides, isolate the parentheses. 3x minus 2 squared equals 21. Then we're going to divide by 3 on both sides. We get x minus 2 squared equals 21 over 3 equals 7. Then we got to take the square root of both sides to get rid of the squared term. So we get x minus 2 equals the square root of 7, but it's plus or minus the square root of 7 because we took the square root of both sides. So now the last step would be to add 2, x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. Okay, and we can't combine those because one's a radical. Now this last one here, be careful with fractions. Remember, to get rid of a fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply both sides by -2. Okay, the fraction's going to go way over here, and we're going to be left with x plus 5 squared equals, and then the other side becomes -16. Now to undo the square, we got to take the square root of both sides. We are going to get, this goes away, x plus 5. We took the square root, so this is where we're going to end up with a plus or minus situation. Plus or minus the square root of -16 is 4i. Then we got to subtract 5, and we get x equals, standard form would be the real number part going first. So -5 plus or minus 4i, since this is a complex number and we want to write it in standard form. Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3 problems to try out from this video.